This devotional is very relevant for those who are going through difficulties because of Christ. One, and also those who are exposed to those who are going through difficulties, because it could change your perception. You could look at people in chains and you're wondering if the gospel is real. Why are you in chains? So it goes both ways, that either you are the person in chain or you're seeing those you revere, those you believe in to be close to God, but yet they're in chains. It can be confusing. So, but when you hear and you know better, I think that's how. Hello, I'm bringing you devotion today from Philippians chapter 1 from verse 12 to 20. So I think the beginning point is Paul says that what we know matters. What you know actually does matter. And this time he was talking about a revelational and experiential knowledge than a mental intellectual knowledge, because what they know will matter. So 4 times he mentions the word know. First, he says, I want you, my audience, to know. Secondly, he says, those who preach. In fact, the soldiers, they know. And then he says again, those who preached know that God has sent me to defend the gospel. Then finally, he says, I know that when you pray for me. So the knowledge is very important, because what you know does matter. So maybe 3 things I'm going to mention today that Apostle Paul was saying that we need to know. 1, you need to know that the gospel matters. He said you need to know that the gospel matters. It matters to God. And that's the reason why it's indestructible. Even if Paul is going to be in chains or difficulties, God is concerned about the gospel, its spread, its continuity. Apostle Paul says that beyond God knowing that it matters, you also need to know that it matters to him. Because he says, I don't mind to suffer, I don't mind to be in prison, so long as the good news is spreading. And then he says again about himself that I rejoice even in adversity, to the extent that the gospel is proclaimed in the midst of my adversity. So the gospel does matter to him. And the gospel in this sense means Christ revealed. It is not just maybe a persuasive word, well-coined out words about Christ and what he's done, but it's actually revealing the person of Christ. And when Christ is revealed to us and we can encounter him, then it begins to matter to us. That's another point. We see that it said when the soldiers could perceive Christ as the reason why I am in chains, the gospel also mattered to them. When those who were outside I'm in chains, and they knew it's because of Christ, they could see Christ in the midst of my adversity, then it mattered to them. They proclaimed the gospel even the more. So the text says that we as believers should know that the gospel matters both to God, to apostles of old, and to everyone who truly encounters Jesus. The gospel matters to them. The other thing he says you need to know is that the gospel is spiritual and the gospel is powerful. Chains cannot limit it. Of course, there are chains, there are prisoners, there were soldiers standing all around, but they were never a match for the gospel. So it's spiritual. So you can hold my mouth, you can hold my words, you can limit my freedom, but you cannot stop the wind. Because when we are born again and the words that we proclaim, they are spirit and they are life, and in fact, it's indestructible. And God is directly behind us. And that's very important for us to know. And then he says the other thing, you need to know that prayer does matter. And that partnership in prayers does matter. So he says to them, I know, as in verse 19, I know that as you pray for me, the energy of the Spirit is going to be released. As we pray, we release the supernatural force that makes the gospel what it is. Paul was addressing the church in Philippi because they have a history of what prayer can do. He was locked up with Silas in the prison when he just came to proclaim the gospel there after a mighty work with Lydia. And then in the night, as they prayed and as they worshiped the Lord, there was prison break. All the chains were broken. He had already known what the power of prayer. And he says to them, I know that as we pray, this will also end in glory. So as we proclaim the gospel, we need to know that what God has called us to do is to have a personal revelation of him and to reveal him to the world. The more we encounter him, the more we can enable the world to see him. We're enthusiastic about it. What puts the enthusiasm in us to preach the gospel is not just a command, but a personal revelation of him. Once I know him, I'm going to talk about him everywhere. And then you can't forget that prayer is important. It keeps that passion sustained so that when you're in adversity, you can keep smiling. Not because you chose to smile, but the Spirit of God, through partnership in prayers, keeps that glory and that joy on your inside. So I pray that we'll find more time to reflect on this, and then that God speaks greatly into our hearts. And God bless you. Thank you.